The Mystara project is proud to present Part 11 of the Lore of Mystara series. In this video, we look at the Late Bronze and Early Iron Age period, spanning BC 1750 to BC 1501. A period dominated by cataclysms and rampaging humanoid hordes. During this 250-year period, the Nithian River Valley civilization progressed from bronze to iron technology. During this era of cataclysms and rampaging humanoids, it is believed that the Nithians' tin supply ceased, forcing them to experiment with other minerals. This led to the development of iron ore smelting via using bellows in charcoal furnaces. This development gave the Nithians a technological advantage over its neighbors by providing cheaper weapons and more efficient tools. In BC 1750 BC, the Tameran city-states of the southeastern Brune coast were arguably Mystara's most advanced human civilization. Their wealth was based on maritime trade, supplemented by fishing and farming. Goods traded included white marble, gold jewelry, such as brooches and rings, silver, copper, gold, platinum, pottery, fruit, gold chalices, silver candlesticks and candelabras, oak timber, metal armor, weapons such as spears, daggers, swords, and axes, gems like lapis lazuli, emeralds, sapphires, and soap. They traded with the Medita elves, the Makai to the northwest, the Taurali to the northeast, and the Nithians on the western Sea of Dawn coast. Of the 16 or so city-states of the Tamarans, Kolheda was the largest and most important. The city had a long line of monarchs ruling from their unusual octagonal palace, with a ground floor and 4 dungeon levels. More unusual was the location of the throne room on the lowest level of the dungeon, near the prison cells and catacombs. Prince Haedric of Kolheda, son of Cordic, is imprisoned by his brother for treason. Fearing execution, Haedric made a pact with Entropy, perhaps with the immortal Nyx, agreeing to cheat death by becoming a species of underwater vampire, Avelia. Using his new powers, Haedric escaped and began eliminating his enemies. His brother discovered Haedric's pact and had a sword forged to slay Haedric, wedging it in the chest of a bronze golem guardian that resembles a fire giant. An immortal, perhaps Proteus, imbued the sword with intelligence and powers to defeat Haedric until he was destroyed. Haedric's brother hid an animal hide message about how to defeat Haedric and a wooden stake in a secret compartment under his throne, presumably unable to defeat his brother himself. In BC 1750, a great series of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes split several large land masses away from southeastern Brune into the Sea of Dread. The most spectacular of the eruptions occurred in the Kikianu caldera, which had a diameter of about 280 miles, to the south of Malfegi Swamp. The caldera sunk below the sea, leaving one large island and 4 smaller ones, now known as Elegy, Fletcher, Honor, and Royster. Honor Island was reduced to the active volcano Mount Carla and Black Ash. The eruption killed many Makai and Malfegi lizard men. The survivors were confined to the large island. Medita elves were stranded on an eastern isle, now known as Alf Isle. Verdia elves found themselves on the newly formed Sea of Dread coast. Many Medita, Verdia, and Aquarendi elves perished in the cataclysm. The elves started calling the surrounding waters the Sea of Dread, and the new archipelago, the Isles of Dread. The earthquakes caused the collapse of a plateau to the east of the Great Waste, a smaller predecessor of today's Etruagan Plateau, killing many and causing hardship for the survivors. Some of the surviving Azcan-Oltecs fled into the Sind Desert, where game could still be found. Initial conflict between these newcomers and the Urduk desert nomads was eventually resolved into cooperation and intermarriage, as the refugees adopted Urduk ways. The cataclysm changed the weather patterns, increasing rain in the Asanda River Valley, resulting in the growth of vegetation. The earthquakes that rocked the Sea of Dread drastically changed the Serpent Peninsula. Rising seas flooded most of the central lowlands, forming the shallow Diki Namazi Sea and the swampy Okwonga lowlands. Suddenly deprived of major cities, countless villages, and their best farmland, the Tanagoro culture collapsed into tribes fighting over the remaining land. Some carved out territories on the newly formed Thanagir Island, others moved north into the rainforest, slashing and burning jungle into farmland as they went. This conflict was aided by an artifact buried under the Diki Namazi sea floor that had now been exposed via a crack. The cataclysm destroyed the majority of Tamaran civilization, as their lands were submerged by tidal waves of the rising sea and battered by hurricanes. Some survived by fleeing to the northern forests of what is now Karamikos. The city of Kolhada sank to the sea floor, half of it falling off the sea shelf. Prince Hadric survived. He began transforming the underwater city into a lair of his liking, with disturbing murals, traps, decoys, false crypts, undead and charmed sea creatures. Each year after the cataclysm, more of the Nakakande rainforest fell to the axes of the Tanagoro, and each year, the water level rose higher, turning the southern fields into swamp, and forcing the Tanagoros farther north. The Shialia elves resisted fiercely, but lost more and more ground. Elven pleas for Karimari assistance against the Tanagoros fell on deaf ears. The elves could not sway the Karimari from their isolationism. The war was exacerbated by the artifact under the Diki Namazi. Sometime between BC 1749 and BC 1729, Barca was born in the Ethengarian steppes. Sometime between BC 1735 and BC 1700, Takati is born among the Azkanoltek peoples south of Lake Amsarak. The bugbear, Hrugik, is born in either Erzud between BC 1728 and BC 1725, or as part of King Lork's Great Horde between BC 1725 and BC 1708, or in the Broken Lands between BC 1708 and AC 840. In BC 1725, the Orc King Lork raised the Great Horde of Orcs, comprising Orcus Imperator Rex and Orcus Porcus, goblins, comprising Goblinus, bugbears, comprising Ursus bipedis bugberbianus and Ursus bipedis vulgaris, and trolls, consisting of Monstrum carnivorus maximus, at Erzud. He put an end to the Steel Wars by wiping out the warring chiefs. King Lork then decided to quest for the Blue Knife. The horde headed eastward, ravaging the great northern wildlands and Dinagoth. Hordes of goblins and trolls left the Great Horde to settle in those areas. The Wolf-Claw goblins, Evil Eye Orcs and Bloody Head Orcs settled the Mengul Mountains. In BC 1722, the Great Horde continued east, and ravaged Norvold, sending the local Antalian culture into a dark age. Humanoid tribes settled the Norvold region and learnt Antalian culture. In BC 1720, Akilla Khan, hobgoblin chief of the Nightbringers Horde, raised a horde of Goblinus grandis hobgoblins, Orcus Canis oriensis yellow orcs, and Goblinus oriensis goblins at Erzud. He headed south to also quest for the Blue Knife. His horde crossed Vendar, the Vendarian ranges and followed the Dolanoa River to the Ethengarian steppes. He then conquered the southern steppes. Further earthquakes and eruptions split the large island south of the Malfegi swamp in the Sea of Dread into 6 islands, what are now called Earendi, White, Alcove, Aloysius, Safari and Utter. Inspired by Ordana, and encouraged by the Aquarendi, Verdia elves build ships and set sail to join their stranded brethren, the Medita elves, on Alf Isle. Together they engaged in handicrafts, shipbuilding and exploration of Alf Isle and the surrounding sea. The Aquarendi inhabit the sunlit sea around Alf Isle to be close to the Verdia and Medita elves. Some elves remain in the Dimrak forest where they eventually become the Vialia clan. Tribes of Mero fled the oceanic upheavals and migrated north. Some stayed around the waters of the Thanagayath archipelago, founding Tuela, whilst others venture further north to the sunlit sea. Sometime between BC 1720 and BC 1688, Arkilla Khan's shamans trapped the young blue dragon Bletin Feroth during the Battle of Many Days in the Ethengarian steppes, but failed to kill her. In BC 1710, the Great Horde headed south from Norvold along the coast and invaded the Ethengarian steppes. Various renegade clans, like the Black Moon Trolls, left the Great Horde and continue south. Lork enslaves the northern Ethengarians. Arkilla Khan's horde in the southern steppes allied with King Lork against the Ethengarians. In BC 1709, the renegade clans from the Great Horde settle in the northern reaches. Arkilla Khan betrayed King Lork in exchange for lands west of the Dol Arnoa River, by allying with the Ethengarians. The allies defeated Lork at the Battle of Chonga on the north bank of the Krandai River, southwest of the Sea of Flowers. The Great Horde fled southwest, except for their goblins, who fled south into the central Altan Tepe Mountains. Arkilla Khan then double-crossed the Ethengars and enslaved them again. Barca rallied a group of Ethengars and started a guerrilla war against the humanoids. In BC 1708, King Lork's great horde settled in the Broken Lands in the area of today's Sun's Anvil. In BC 1700, southeast Brune was rocked by yet another cataclysm. Elves from the southern highlands exploring the Broken Lands found a Blackmore nuclear device. They tinkered with it, accidentally causing it to explode. The massive explosion produced impenetrable clouds in the sky for years. The Broken Lands became unstable. The Highland elves living miles away were inflicted by a rotting plague. The elves sheltered themselves in the deepest caves of the Highlands. There they found an incredible series of caverns and began a long subterranean migration. The elves that migrated were the Trudel, Belcadese, Porador, Felister, Celebril and Gelbalf clans, the predecessors of the Icevale elves and Atzian's clan. The cataclysm buries the Great Horde under the Broken Lands, killing King Lork. The Great Horde breaks apart. Winds carried the fallout from the explosion far to the northeast, creating the land of black sand in the eastern Ethengarian steppes. The grass of the steppes withered and died, Arkilla's humanoids, Ethengarians and animals fell sick. Links with the spirit world strengthened, especially in the land of black sand, where permanent gates to the spirit world and entropic outer planes opened. Benign spirits assisted Ethengarian shamans in countering the influx of evil spirits. Driven by hunger and competition with giant tribes, common, earth, rock and giant troll hordes migrated from Norvold to the Trollheim hills of the northern reaches. Humanoids migrated southwest to the Yazak steppes. After BC 1700, a band of starving goblins in the Ultan Tepe mountains of Dengar turned to cannibalism, with the younger members eating their elders. Over time these goblins degenerated into chokers and began preying on goblins, dwarfs, and others. Sometime between BC 1699 and BC 1651, Atzian's clan reached a cave in the Broken Lands where they founded the settlement of Ingmor. Some settled whilst Atzian and the others continued on through the tunnels. In BC 1691, the Ethengarians led by Barca ambushed Arkilla Khan in an arranged trade meeting and drove his Nightbringers horde out of the steppes. Barca's forces continued to battle with remnant humanoids on the steppes. Over a period of years, the Trudel Elven clan travelled almost 400 miles to the south through cavernous tunnels, learning to survive in their subterranean environment. Tragedy after tragedy struck them, as their beloved leaders died, as the rotting disease claimed their young, and as subterranean monsters killed their brave. They knew that they were being punished for the sin of the discovery and activation of the Blackmore device, also they were told by the cruel immortal Thanatos, eager to hurt them with lies. By the time they emerged, perhaps around BC 1690, in the seaside forests of the Deepland, any spirit they had was completely crushed. They knew that the responsibility for the disaster was theirs, that they were a useless and vile race, that life was a cruel and unpleasant joke. They returned to their old ways of living in the woods, but this time it was without life or animation. They became friends with the animals and sentient races of the forest, but lacking in ambition or hope, their numbers dwindled. In BC 1690, Arkilla Khan settled in the northeastern Broken Lands and built a fortress there to raid the southwestern Ethengarian steppes and the southeastern highlands. After the poisonous clouds dissipate around 1690 BC, humanoids moved into the southern highlands territory that was formerly held by the elves. Humanoids dominated this region until 200 BC. In BC 1688, Arkilla Khan retires from public life and ascends as the immortal Yagrai in the sphere of entropy, possibly sponsored by Demogorgon, or the father of demons. He splits his territory between his sons. Hobgoblins gravitate to the west and yellow orcs congregate to the east. The Ethengarians rejoice at the demise of Arkilla Khan, and the end of the war. Barca declares himself the first Khan of the Ethengar, modelled on Arkilla, and divides the Ethengar into tribes. In BC 1681, an aging Barca Khan was poisoned by rival Khans, and was buried on World Mountain. A war of succession ensued. Sometime between BC 1680 and BC 1610, the Trudels of the Deepland developed a philosophy which they called the Still Way. In it, they found the first shred of hope they'd experienced in decades. The Stillway said that they should perform as little activity as possible, other than that necessary to survive from one day to the next, and use all their energy in thinking about their past misdeeds, ways to avoid repeating those mistakes, etc. With so much thinking going on, they must inevitably acquire the wisdom necessary to earn forgiveness of the immortals. So they adhered to their gentle, quiet, modest, pacifistic ways for centuries. In BC 1675, Takati was the first of his people to domesticate horses, receiving the nickname Storm Tamer. With cavalry at his disposal, he used force to subjugate the neighboring tribes of the Thundering Plains. Once in control of the Thundering Plains, he united the remaining Azcanoltec tribes by force, forming the Children of the Horse. Azcanoltec descendants flee the forces of Takati Storm Tamer to settle and farm the Asanda River Valley. The climatic changes caused by the BC 1750 cataclysm had been beneficial for the valley, leading to increased rainfall, mild winters and forestation. They found the rich soil surrounding the river perfect for their crops, and established many riverside communities. They call themselves the Sindhi, possibly after the Asanda River or possibly relating to the desert. They began peaceably trading with the nomadic Urduks, who were also enjoying a less infertile Sindh desert after the 1750 BC cataclysm. The Urduks traded meat, milk, and hides for surplus grains and handcrafted goods provided by the Sindhi. Sometime between BC 1675 and BC 300, Sindhis founded the small village of Darsatra on the Asanda River, a few miles from its mouth. An early Grand Mumal of the Asanda River region, Hooghly, developed the port near Darsatra and opened up trade in jute, bamboo, teak, and spices. Sometime between BC 1675 and AC 980, Sindhis founded the port settlement of Tijaret on the eastern coast of the Neck of the Serpent Peninsula. Sometime between BC 1668 and AC 900, Krugik achieved immortality on the path of the Paragon, possibly sponsored by Tor. He took the name Bartsaluth and became the patron of bugbears, warfare, and berserkers. In BC 1660, after much loss of life, the Ethengarians finished their war of succession and split into hundreds of clans. Takati Storm Tamer became immortal in the sphere of energy, following the path of the Paragon, sponsored by Otsityotl. His sudden departure resulted in the dissolution of his Thundering Plains realm and reversion to tribal warfare. In BC 1650, elves emerge in the Nether lands of the Hollow World after 50 years of wandering in caverns, following the Broken Lands cataclysm. They make their way north to a region they call Icevale. Clanmaster Atzian also reached the Hollow World after 50 years of wandering in caverns, following the Broken Lands cataclysm. He was the sole surviving member of his clan, all the others perished during the long journey. This left him bitter and twisted. He settled amongst the Azcans, concealing his true identity, and learnt of their savage culture. In BC 1600, one of the largest Gennite hordes turned to the following of Rathanos and the belief in male superiority. The other major horde had female warriors and was inspired by the immortal Terastia to attack the Rathanos following horde that had virtually enslaved women. There were heavy casualties on both sides, and it became clear that this war would not be resolved for some time. Terastia decided to transport some of her followers to the Hollow World before the war took further toll on Gennite society. Another group of Tanagoro sailed southwest from the Tangor Peninsula and founded a colony on a small island in the Far End Ocean, near the southern tropic and north of Cape Fire. Tribes of hill and stone giants migrated from Norvold to the northern reaches with a few frost and fire giants. Most settled in the Makkress Mountains, but a few settled in the Hardanger Mountains. The giants were unimpressed that trolls already occupied the Trollheim Hills. Sometime between BC 1599 and BC 1560, a powerful Nithian wizard created a jackal-headed guardian that he called Fla. Unfortunately, a rival assassinated the wizard on Fla's watch. Fla tracked down and dealt with the rival, gaining his library in the process. With access to 2 wizard libraries, Fla started learning magic. Sometime between BC 1569 and BC 1554, Artruat Sin was born in Chitlikan in the Azcan Empire of the Hollow World. Sometime between BC 1550 and BC 1510, Chibai was born in the Ethengarian steppes. Sometime between BC 1550 and BC 1500, the Gennite intertribal war ended. The conflict all but destroyed Gennite civilization, marking the start of their decline to Stone Age barbarism. Sometime between BC 1550 and BC 1100, the Gennites suffered a series of disasters, including a plague that wiped out their aurochs. The Gennite population starved and dwindled. Their technology regressed to Stone Age barbarism. Contact was lost with the coastal Gennites. They started breeding regular cattle to replace the aurochs. Sometime between BC 1550 and BC 1501, Fla reached 36th level as a magic user. Under Ra's guidance, he undertook the path of the Paragon in the sphere of energy. As part of his testimony, he transformed the Nithian valley with irrigation systems in a 100-mile radius that hastened the civilization's rise. For his trial, Fla created a flail that could be used by magic users that gave the wielder the skill of a fighter of the same level and an armor class of 0. After dueling and defeating 8 powerful Nithian wizards, Fla achieved immortality as the patron of crafts, magical learning, and knowledge. This concludes our look at the period spanning BC 1750 to BC 1501, which witnessed the progression of Nithia from Bronze to Iron Age technology, 2 Southeast Brune cataclysms and 2 rampaging humanoid hordes.